Welcome back. Today we're going to be covering a brand new expandable card game. This one is called Vampire the Masquerade Rivals. It is from Renegade Game Studios in conjunction with Paradox Entertainment. This one's taken off of the critically acclaimed Vampire RPG from Paradox as well.
Yeah, there's an entire line of these games. I'm sure most people will recognize the name at least. And they all take place in what's called the World of Darkness, which is a very supernatural world where vampires operate in secret and other supernatural creatures lurk. This game focuses on the dealings of vampire clans fighting for prestige in the city of San Francisco. Only one clan can be named Prince of the City, and that's basically what you're competing for in this game.
One of the more unique things right from the start of the game is that it is a 2 to 4 player game. Yes, I said that right. Most of these LCGs, CCGs, expandable card games are a one-on-one venture. This is one that can be played at 4 players, meaning that when you sit down at the table, one player at the table who's going to be your particular rival.
That's right. At the start of the game, everyone is going to be dealt a little token that has a player count number on it. Now, these tokens are going to determine who is your foe for this particular game. And that is something that is going to become very important later on.
All right, so we'll start at the very beginning. Like any good expandable card game, each of the players is going to come to the table with a particular clan in front of them. This is called your coterie. You're going to have a number of different vampires. In this base set, there's 4 of them. And each of these is going to have their own thematic link to each other. So they're all going to be able to do very different things very well compared to other things. Now, as you start to expand the game out, you're going to be able to mix and match vampires together. So you can have different clans intermixing with others. But we're going to talk about them in the most general sense. So when you look in front of you, you're going to have your lead vampire. This is made up of your vampire that has the highest amount of health points on it. Each of us is going to lay that one out in front of us and then have a secondary deck that's going to have all the other vampires in your clan. In this case, there's 7 vampires for each of these different clans in front of them. Again, those can be mix and match as you start to expand the game out. Plus, you're going to have a secondary deck. This is your main deck that you would consider building out at the beginning of each one of these games. This is going to have a number of different cards in it, again, to your liking. These are going to include things like attack cards, reaction cards, ongoing cards, title cards, scheme cards. All of these things are going to come into play in very unique ways.
That's right, and that's kind of the key about building a deck, is focusing on something specific that you want to complete, because you're going to have to choose an agenda to bring to the table with you. Now, each one of these pre-made decks that comes with the starter kit is going to have an agenda that is kind of tailored to that faction and plays to the faction's strengths. Each one of these agendas is going to give you a way to score agenda points. You're going to see these little crown tokens that you can place on your agenda as the game goes on. These are basically considered victory points. And again, you can mix and match these. Part of the fun of building a deck is finding different ways to complete these different agendas.
And each one of the agendas is going to be very different from another. For instance, when I look at my Brujah vampires, my agenda is to kill non-rival characters. So this plays into that 3 and 4 player aspect, as well as killing characters from this city deck, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Also, each of the players is going to have a singular haven that is going to be placed in front of them. So not only are you going to start with a leading vampire and an agenda, but you'll start with a haven. This haven is going to give your leader some kind of unique ability, plus it's going to create secrecy for your vampires where they can hide to not be able to be attacked during the game.
Yeah, one of the cool things about gameplay that's very important to understand is there's basically 2 places the game can take place. You can hide your vampires out in your haven, where they're going to basically be manipulating things from the shadows and kind of healing up over the course of the game, or they can be out in the streets. And this is kind of an abstract row. Vampires that are out in the streets can interact with other vampires that are out in the streets, as well as those city cards. And this city deck is going to be predetermined at the start of the game. You're going to have a number of base cards that come in here, and then you're going to deal in 6 random events, shuffle that all together, and that's going to be your city deck for that particular game.
The majority of these city cards are going to consist of 3 different types. First type is you have events, as Ryan already alluded to. These are going to either be ongoing or one-time events that are going to do something to everybody at the table. Then you're going to have a number of different mortals. These are people that can mess with everyone at the table as well. For instance, we're looking at the Special Affairs Division, which we'll get into a little bit later, but they play a very important part about hunting vampires down through the course of the game. And then you're going to have a title card, again, which we'll talk about in just a moment. That card can come out randomly, and players will be competing for that singular title over all of San Francisco. All right, so we have a two-player game set up. So we're going to kind of walk you through what a basic turn looks like, what you're going to be doing during this, the actions on your turn. The game takes place in turns, so to speak. Each player is going to go through a full turn, and it's going to move clockwise around the table. You're simply going to follow this player aid to go through all of those different actions, with the very first thing happening being the beginning phase. Now, there's 3 different phases in a round. You have a beginning phase, you have an action phase, and you're going to end it with an end phase, obviously. During the beginning phase, you're going to go through 3 different steps. The first being you're going to introduce one more card from the city deck to the street itself. Again, these are going to introduce new types of events, new types of mortals, and as we just drew there, the Prince of the City card, which is the title, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Once that is done, you're going to go to the ready step. This is where you untap all of your cards that you've used in the previous round, or just ready them for action in that round. And then finally, you're going to return all of the vampires from the street back to your haven. Now, of course, you can bring these back out during your turn during the action phase.
Right, and once you're done with that, you're going to be able to take 2 actions on your turn. And these actions are going to be a combination of actions that require a vampire to take them, and then what they call unhosted actions, which are just actions you can take. Unhosted actions are things like drawing cards from either one of these decks or playing vampires. Now, you get to start with 1 vampire in play at the beginning of the game, and every vampire has a cost at the top of their card that has to be paid out to them in blood. Now, every player is going to come to the game with a certain number of prestige tokens, 20 for the game that we're playing. Every time you summon a vampire, including your starting vampire, you have to pay for that by taking that same number of prestige and actually flipping it over from the prestige side to the blood side. Now you actually have a hit point tracker for that vampire. Every additional vampire you play, the cards with the red backs, are going to require you to do the same thing. So you have to be careful. If you ever completely run out of this prestige, the game is over. So you have to manage this pool as you're playing vampires out in front of you.
And that's one of the more unique things about this game, before we keep going through all these different actions, is that this game requires management of that prestige and the management of the health on your vampires. And as you want to bring more vampires into the game to have more flexibility with your actions, you're giving up that prestige, which is so important because it acts as life for you as the character. And there's a lot of ways to bleed out that life from other players, not just through killing their vampires, but through killing the player itself. So you have to manage that, and it's really thematic to the game. All right, so Ryan's already talked about drawing a card and recruiting a vampire. One of the other actions is to actually play one of the cards from your hand that states action, and there's a variety of these as well. There's a couple that we'll talk about. Some of them are ongoing actions, which you just pay the cost of that particular card and you lay it out in front of you. These are kind of ongoing events that you have in front of you to be able to power other types of abilities. You have schemes. These are things that players at the table will universally bid on to get those particular schemes to take effect. And Ryan, you have a faction that's very good at a different type of ongoing
which is
effect.
Conspiracy cards. And schemes and conspiracy cards are very interesting because they actually bring in full participation and negotiation into the games. Every scheme card is going to have either a yes outcome or a no outcome. For example, Jeremy's yes outcome is just everybody gets more prestige, which is really good. But every vampire is going to have a number of influence. Your leader starts with 1, and other vampires might gain influence through titles and things like that. You get to bid that influence. Basically, I can say, I'm spending all my influence to vote no or to vote yes. And you're going around the table. And this is where the game, I think, really expands into that negotiation territory. Because we can make promises back and forth to each other. I can offer things for you to vote yes and support my scheme. Conspiracy cards are very similar, except they're placed face down. When you play a conspiracy card face down, you can power it by placing prestige on it. But you can also give other players the option to come in and give you prestige as well. They're helping you power your card. But every conspiracy has a bad thing that happens to somebody that did not contribute. So again, you're at the table negotiating because maybe I don't want Jeremy to benefit from this conspiracy card. So I'm going to open it up to the other players at the table exclusively, including myself, to try to power this card. So those card examples are very unique actions that I've not really seen in other LCGs.
No, as you can already see, there are multiple different layers that you have to consider on every single one of the actions that you do in the game. Not only that, but the way that you build your decks and how you want your cards to synergize. This is one of those games where as you build your deck, you're going for very specific objectives in the game on how you want to approach a victory. And we'll get into all the victory conditions in just a moment as well. Now, the two final actions that you can do on your turn is to either attack or to claim the Prince of the City card. Attacking is going to be probably the most prevalent action that you take in the game. This is going to be done either with cards in your hand that say the keyword attack on them, or actually sending your guys to the street, tapping them, so to speak, or exhausting them, and then choosing players to attack that are vulnerable. Remember, if players are in the Haven, you can't attack them unless you have
intel. Yes.
Intel on
everybody
them, right?
that is hiding out in your havens, it's a mechanic called secrecy. Now, there are many ways to get intel. You can even just discard cards from your hand to generate intel, or play cards that maybe give you some intel. But attacking in this game is a little interesting because vampires that are out in the streets are going to run together in parties. When you're looking at a party of vampires, you're going to kind of stack them together, and they're going to basically attack together. So you're going to choose one vampire in that party to lead the attack, and then other vampires in that party can choose to use their abilities to boost that attack if they have any. Now, you're going to notice that every vampire has 3 different methods they can use to attack: physical combat, social combat, or mental combat. Each one of these attacks is going to link to specific cards in your hand that can boost that attack. If I'm attacking with a physical, then I can only play physical cards from my hand to attack. It's going to give me some kind of boost to my normal stat, and I'm going to add together all the boosts I might get from abilities, cards I played, and the base stat to determine what my attack is. But Jeremy will have the option to potentially defend against that attack with a card from his hand as well.
Not only those 3 traits that you can attack with, but there's also a number of different icons at the bottom that are abilities that, again, can key off very particular cards that you have in your hand or that you have in play. But you can also attack things in the city as well. You have a number of different mortals that you can defeat and gain some of that agenda points towards, or instead attach them to your characters to get ongoing benefits. So again, there's a lot of different options that you can play here throughout the game. One of the cool options too is that you don't have to always attack your rival, hence the name of the game.
Yeah.
You can attack other players. There are strategic points in this game in 3 and 4 player games where I don't want Ryan to get very particular victory conditions. So I may attack his rival to steal those from him. So again, there's lots of things to consider within the game. The final option that you can do on your turn instead of attacking is to try to claim the Prince of the City card.
Yeah, and this is a special action that can only take place once the Prince of the City card actually comes out. And this is a title that you can try to grab. This is a huge element of the game because this title is going to give you reoccurring victory points every turn that you hold it. But in order to claim the title, you're exposing yourself to attack from every vampire that's in the street. Every player that has a ready vampire can choose to commit them to the attack, and you're just basically taking that damage. But if you survive, you get to take that Prince of the City card, place it on them, and you're getting benefits every turn. Now there's a caveat to that because once you have this card, you can never hide in secrecy again. You are always exposed, and any other vampire can either kill you, which would cause this to be discarded, or they can try to claim this title for themselves. Of course, they're also exposing themselves to the attack. So this Prince of the City title is going to be passed around throughout the course of the game, but it is a great way to earn those agenda points in addition to working towards your agenda card. Another thing Jeremy alluded to is by defeating your foes' vampires, you're also earning agendas. So there are a lot of ways to earn these agenda points to kind of push you towards the end of the game.
Yeah, and when your vampires do die, they're not out of the game, period. They go into a sidebar here where they will kind of revitalize because vampires obviously can't be killed. That's going to lead into the end phase, which is going to take place over 3 different actions as well.
Yeah, that's right. This is called the torpor state, which some of you who are familiar with Vampire will probably recognize. Whenever one of your vampires is killed or defeated, it's going to come off to the side of the board, and you're going to automatically turn one of your personal prestige into blood to place on them. During this stage of the game, they're going to start healing. You're going to look to the general supply, so you're not taking this out of your hit points basically, but you're just going to keep putting one on them. When the number of blood tokens on that card equals their blood value, they're going to wake back up and come back into play. In addition, you'll have an option during this phase to mend. You can discard 1 card per vampire into your discard pile to heal a vampire from the supply if it had taken wounds during that round. In addition, a lot of these vampires are going to have specific abilities that might trigger during the end game. Now, the last thing that happens is you have to deal with those vampire hunters that Jeremy mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so there's a number of cards in this deck, the City Event deck. They're called the Special Affairs Division. They're going to do 1 damage of your choice to any number of vampires that you see out here per special division that you have out.
Yeah.
These will have to be dealt with because they can get out of control very quickly. So community players are going to want to defeat them. But there is a caveat or a good reward from doing so. You're going to get 1 of those agenda points each time that you do defend them or defeat them. The last thing that's going to happen on your turn, which is actually you get to draw 2 cards, which is really important to cycling the cards in your deck. Now, you can draw cards from either of the 2 decks in any combination. So you can draw 2 from your main deck, 2 from your vampire deck, or 1 from each if you so choose. And you're going to be doing this around the table over and over until one of 3 different victory conditions are met. Now, I'll talk about the first one. The first one is that agenda that you have in front of us. Right now in this base game, everyone has to have 13 agenda points on their agenda card. That's going to end the game immediately. All of these can be accrued in differing ways. If I look at my guy here, as I said before, each non-rival that I kill that's a character, I'm going to place 1 on here, in addition to any kind of agenda points that they naturally would give.
Right, and each agenda has a very specific requirement. Mine here wants me to flip conspiracy cards. Jeremy's wants him to attack. There are some that want you to recruit people from the city. It's an immediate stop if you have 13 agenda points, or if you are the player that eliminates your foe. And that's why that foe is so important, because if somebody else eliminates your foe, you don't get that instant victory. But if you either kill their last vampire or are the one that eliminates their last prestige, then the game ends immediately and you are the victor. Now, both of those conditions just end the game with you winning. However, there are ways that you end the game without actually that instant win condition. And that is anytime a player loses their last vampire or their last prestige and was not eliminated by their foe, the game still ends. So you're not out sitting watching everybody else play. The game ends, you finish that round, and then you just see who had the most agenda points up to that point.
All right, so I appreciate you guys sitting through it this far. There's a lot of things going on in this game. Rivals has a lot of expandable content as well, and like with any expandable card game, it's all about trying to find the right combinations of vampires and schemes and cards that work together. In addition to these 4 base clans that you have at the start of the game, there's going to be a crypt pact as well that you can get with it.
Yeah, this is going to come with the base starter kit. You get all 4 of these pre-made decks, and it's like 150 something extra cards are going to come in it so that you can start customizing your deck right away. Because really what you're seeing here and what we've even played with is really just a small taste of what you can do with this card game. Because as it expands, and as power creep sets in, you're going to be able to really pull off some epic schemes and some epic moves. I'm excited about seeing all the new agenda cards and the ways to earn victory points that are coming.
I think one of the things we also need to mention, despite this being a sponsored preview, is that we have played this game multiple times, but we feel like this is a game that really is best with multiple players. At 2-player, it's fine. It works perfectly well. However, with the negotiation that goes on with a lot of the scheme cards, having multiple players at the table and the backstabbing that's going to take that in this game is going to be more prevalent with more players at the table, because not only are you trying to defeat your rival, but you're trying to stop other players from defeating their rivals as well.
Right. There's a whole aspect of negotiation that you get in a 3- and 4-player game, not just from the cards, but also from the attacks. I can try to persuade Jeremy by offering him maybe some protection later or some influence or playing cards, whatever I can offer him to maybe not attack someone or to attack someone. You can even actually play some reaction cards on the behalf of other players or use some special abilities to block and save other players' vampires. And this is all happening kind of at a meta level while you're playing the mechanics we talked about. And it's hard to show in any kind of preview how that happens and that amount of negotiation that can happen in a 3- or 4-player game.
Yeah, that's right, Ryan. So I know that we covered a lot here today. If you guys have any questions at all about the game, we've played it enough to maybe answer all those for you. If not, we'll put you in contact with the people that do know. Make sure you guys check out the Kickstarter page for all the final components. Everything you saw here today was in prototype form. And thanks for watching, guys. Hey everyone, if you guys enjoyed this video, please consider dinging the old bell below. That is going to help notify you of new videos that are uploaded to our channel. And as always, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and please consider watching all of our videos, one of which you can see right here to my left.